All right, welcome back, friends, family, everybody that's listening, the listeners out there on YouTube, people on the podcast. Man, I know that we have been building our audience, and I'm excited to share Kellan's story. We actually had a very long conversation earlier, and I'm really, really excited to kind of hear the behind the scenes because we talked just briefly on the surface of some of the cool things that were going on. But now we're actually going to dive in and kind of get some of the details that are going on. So make sure you pull up if you're listening, make sure that you pause at the right times. Maybe you might even need to take some notes because I know it's going to be that well worth it today. So again, thank you, Kellan. Thank you for taking the time with us, man. I greatly appreciate your, just spending the time with us. It's a huge sacrifice sometimes, and I greatly appreciate that.
You're welcome, and I want to honor you because, Tim, doing a podcast and doing the work you do is a labor of love. It requires time, effort, energy, and a real heart to serve and lift and bless those people you are trying to address. So I want to start with an acknowledgement and honoring you for the effort and love that you're putting into this work and blessing those that you are serving.
Oh, I appreciate that, but it's a sacrifice for all of us too, right? So, we all have to be here. So let's get started though, because I like to open up with this question. Who is Kellan? Not necessarily what you do, but I like to just open up with the question of who are you? So let's say we meet in an elevator and we got 30, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it is, and and really kind of look at that question of who are you?
I am an alchemist that
Hmm.
mixes science and magic to help not only me, but help people realize who they really are and then do something with the yearning and deep knowledge and nudges that they have felt.
Hmm.
It's a reflection of my own journey, and now it has left me with a yearning to validate and to invite those yearnings in people's hearts to make a difference, to get paid, and to have fulfillment. I call it the ultimate life, purpose, prosperity, and joy. And I use the word alchemist because I love it. And it
I was going to
mixes
say it's a great
science.
word.
It's
That's a
a
great
mix of
word.
science and magic, and some of it feels like both.
Yeah.
That's who I am, and that's all I do.
Yeah, no, and I love that word. I don't think I've ever heard anybody use that word specifically as far as the alchemist, but it's so true. There's things that we can dive in and we can look at and scientifically we can explain to a letter. And then there's other things that are just like, I can't quite explain exactly how this happened and why this is going on, but we know that it exists. So good stuff. So let's jump into the history or what you thought you were going to be when you grew up. I mean, we get that question a lot. Who do you want, especially as kids, right? Especially when we're in our younger lives or even in our 20s, sometimes people ask that question, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to accomplish? What do you want? So what did you believe? What was the narrative that you were drawn to? Or maybe it was something that your parents kind of pushed on you, or maybe it was society. What was that belief that you had? This is how my life is going to work out.
So, my history is very checkered. I was raised in a two-parent home with what seemed normal, but the difficulty was my mom was pretty young when she got married, and she didn't really know how to raise kids, and she was very religiously devoted, and in her mind, the best way to raise kids was to make us do what she thought was right. And in the name of that, I was subject to discipline and punishment that today would be felony child abuse. And so there was a lot of that went on for my whole upbringing. And I would have run away a number of times if I'd known where to go or what to do. And in those days, there was nobody to talk to and no place of refuge. So I left my childhood with this absolute conviction that two things: one, that I was not good enough and never would be, and two, that my life needed to be spent proving to my mom principally, but my parents, but principally mom, that I was okay, to get that stamp of approval on my forehead. And that left me struggling for decades with deep, deep, deep depression. And I lived this roller coaster of self-sabotage. So I created big career success thinking that would prove something. And then I would sabotage it. I don't deserve this. So I made and ruined some careers. I made and ruined 3 marriages and was just created and self-sabotaged over and over and over again. And it led to very dark places, addictions, and a couple of suicide attempts, and, that kind of thing for my whole life until I was 52.
So
So that
how did that flesh that out though? Like when you're looking at, because you're saying that you had these up and downs and all of these different successes, and then you had things fall apart. But one, you said two things, very very important. One, I felt like I was not good enough. Two, and I always had to prove who I was and that it was okay. And so, how did that flesh out, especially in those younger years?
um, when I was at home, it was about grades and getting into college, and you have to live the sort of get a job and the things that were preached then. And it hard. I'm a creative. I was a musician, and that was evil because I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the years of when the hippies first started in the 60s and 70s. And I remember the hippie funeral in 1967 and the Summer of Love, and I lived there and through all that. And I wanted to be a musician, and that was evil and wrong. And so I had to pursue this sort of imaginary, whatever that is, grow up, get a job, do that forever. So my dad did, and that was the only way to be okay. And so it manifested in me being miserable, believing I was wrong for being miserable, and believing the only way I needed to spend my adult life was to pursue this career thing. And every time I did, I got successful. I got good jobs, I got promoted, blah, blah, blah. And then what I know now, I didn't realize it then, I just would enter into this self-sabotage mode. So then I would destroy it. I would do something that I knew would end the career, would end the opportunity. And then I was crashed and I had to start over and do it again.
Mm.
And each time I went up, I imagined that I would get that sort of approval. And I never did. And it never happened. And I didn't know how to get out of that cycle. And each time got bigger and bigger. The successes were bigger, and the crashes then, of course, were bigger.
Yeah.
Over and over again until I was 52. And so it literally was, I mean, I can give all the details you want, but it was the same story over and over again.
So let's jump into this aspect, because I there's a lot of times we pursue what has been. Maybe I should just ask the question: what would you have defined at that point was success?
Get a job, get married, make good money, have a family, take care of them, just sort of be the critical thing. Whether or not you like the job or you feel like it's fulfilling or uses your gifts and talents wasn't even part of the question or the equation. It was go do whatever, get something, but it has to fit into this mold. Go be an executive, an insurance salesman, a physicist, doesn't matter, but has to fit in the box of sort of that predetermined thing without any consideration of whether or not you like it. Like that was not part of the thing. And I was never in a place where I knew whether or not my dad, who did most of the work, even liked his job. I don't know to this day, and he's been dead 20 years, if he enjoyed his work. I have no idea.
Yeah. And so let me ask you another question, because this came up in my own life personally. Did you often feel like you had to be a chameleon? Like you had to actually you put a face on, you put something else on, a persona, whatever you want to call it. Did you ever feel like that's where you had to go?
Every single day. And the bigger the successes got, the more that was true. Toward the end of before the divine intervention in 2007, and I changed directions, I remember coming home from work, going in the study before I would indulge in drugs and substances, and sitting there thinking, I actually don't know who the frick I am. Give me a 3-piece Armani. I can go downtown and be whoever I need to be.
Yep.
But when the lights go out and I come home, I don't know who I am. All the time.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that left you even further. And I'm making a jump here, and I'm assuming that the drugs and some of the other things that you got involved with was just the aspect to be able to escape from all of those pressures and all of the facades that you had to build up.
It is, and the fact that I had failed at, 3 marriages, and so that made me even worse. Something's obviously wrong with me because I'm a jerk. Something's wrong with me. I can't do this. Whatever it is, I can't. And by that time, I was disowned. I was off the Christmas card list. Nobody talked to me. I have 6 brothers and sisters, and nobody, I was gone. I was the black sheep. I was dead meat off the radar.
So let's transfer into this aspect of, because it's definitely a roller coaster, and we could talk probably forever about that, but that doesn't help us. That doesn't solve problems. So what opened up that new way of thinking? What was the situation? Because quite frankly, some people are willing and able to accept that new perspective, whereas others are still trying to follow that up and down success like you described. What was it for you that pretty much just said, hey, I've got to adjust my perspective. I've got to adjust the way that I'm living.
So all of us feel at different times in our lives, often, this isn't right. Whatever this is, this situation isn't. I got to do something. We sort of feel that nudge and sometimes push, and mostly we ignore them. Mostly we talk our way out of them, meaning we can't do this or it won't work or whatever it is. And that was true with me. And finally, what happened in August of 2007 was an invitation and an intervention that was so loud that that it woke me up. It was loud enough. It was a 2x4, so hard and so loud that I woke up. And it was in August of 2007. The situation was I was single again for the third time. I had 4 of my 10 children living with me as a single dad who were teenagers. I was making so much money that my $3,000 a week cocaine habit didn't matter. And that was who I was, effectively expecting, I don't know, to die or whatever. And I'd attempted suicide for the second time 2 weeks before. So I got home on a Friday night in August of 2007 and was going to go out and party for the weekend. And, our house was the party house because I was a really shit for a dad. And so my teenage kids brought all their friends and whatever. And suddenly before I went out, I had this urge to turn on the television. And that doesn't sound like anything, except I didn't know how. I mean, I bought the biggest, coolest stuff because that's what you have. But I picked up the remote and realized I didn't know how to turn it on. So I asked my 16-year-old daughter, and she punched some buttons and, threw the remote at me, dipweed. And it landed on a program I'd never heard of. And it may not be on anymore. I don't know, because that's like 20 years ago, or 18. And the program is called Intervention, which is a reality TV show about families who stage interventions for busted loved ones. And so I watched a few minutes, and the protagonist was a high-ranking executive with a cocaine problem. So I watched my life sort of for about 10 minutes, and I said, yeah, I'm not watching this crap. So I turned it off and went and did some other stuff for a little bit, and it was getting ready to go out, and I had this irrepressible urge to turn the TV back on. So I picked up the remote, and this time I knew how. I turned it on. And that program started over. And it wasn't on the schedule. And no, we didn't have a DVR. And no, it can't do that. But it did. And so I'm like, holy crap. So I sat down and I watched this. And it went badly. The guy swore at his family and stomped out of the intervention and said he didn't have a problem. But when it finished, it sort of freaked me out. And instead of going out to party, I went to bed. And when I went to bed, I went to hell. And what I mean by that is I went somewhere that felt out of body. It was in like a big theater sort of thing. And on the stage were all these scenes playing out. And they were all scenes from my life that focused on suffering. The suffering that had been inflicted on me as a kid up to the suffering that I had inflicted on everybody else. Mm-hmm. As a liar and a drug addict and a lousy dad and a lousy marriage partner and all the things. And the experience of watching that was so intense, it was painful. In my experience of it, beyond anything I can describe. So after what seemed like forever, a voice to the left of me and behind simply said, "It is enough." And I woke up and I was disoriented for 3 reasons. 1, I was upside down and backwards in my bed. 2, the sheets were completely soaked, like wringing out wet soaked. And I can't imagine what would cause that, but I'm assuming that it was the intensity of the experience. The third reason was the sun was shining in the window, and the windows faced west. And I got up and realized it was 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon. So I'd been somewhere for nearly 18 hours. And as I got up, I realized, okay, I've been invited to change. I have no idea what to do, who to talk to, where to start, how to do any of this. None. But I know one thing. I'm done. So I threw away $1,000 worth of drugs and stuff I had laying around, because I always did. And I quit cold turkey that day. So that got me sober. And there's a whole drama about recovery and everything, but that was the day. And that got me sober, but it didn't do anything about how I got there, which was this whole depression and self-sabotage mindset. Well, that was coming. So Monday, I went back to work knowing that I had to get away from everything and start over, but not knowing how. But at least now I'm sober, right? And in the position I had, I used to get free stuff because I made decisions in my position that affected others, sometimes to the tune of billions of dollars, other companies. So I used to get lots of be nice to Kellan stuff, not bribes, but be nice tickets and expensive this, that, and the other. And one of the things I got was a pair of tickets to see a Yo-Yo Ma concert. Now, if you know classical music, you know who that is. And if you don't, you don't. But in the classical world, so I'm like, I'm going. And they were $1,000 tickets. And so they're really expensive, but I didn't have anybody to take. But I didn't want to waste this ticket. So I'm like asking in the groups that I managed, I said, so who likes classical music? And a lady in one of the departments said, well, I do. And I said, have I ever given you anything before? No. I said, okay, fine. See you there. So I gave her the ticket. We met at the venue and the concert was amazing. And it was like 2.5 weeks later. So now as the night of the concert, I'm now 2.5 weeks stone cold sober. Right. And the concert, like I said, was spectacular. And halfway through, I had this feeling come over me that I recognized from 2 weeks before. And this voice said to me, you need to marry this woman. And I said, you're insane. I said, I've screwed that things up 3 times already. I don't know how to do this. I'm barely 2.5 weeks sober. This is not the time. We're not doing that. So later that night, we were backstage. And the reason the tickets were so much money is they were backstage passes and tickets to the reception and all that stuff. So we are backstage and the voice came back and said, and you need to tell her tonight. And I thought, well, I panicked, of course, hyperventilating, and I thought there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, I don't actually know her well enough to know if she's in a relationship. She worked for me in one of my groups, but I didn't know that. And second of all, she can have me arrested or something for harassment. I said, no, we can't do that. But you don't win those arguments. So I did, and it went about like you would have expected. Are you insane? And she left. The good news was she wasn't in a relationship, which I didn't know, and she didn't call the cops or HR or whatever. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, she had her own set of experiences, and about 3 weeks after the concert, so about 6 weeks after the original thing in August, so we're now first part of October, she walked away from her entire career. I resigned from millions of dollars of contracts, and we walked off into the sunset together. And last December, we celebrated our 17th wedding anniversary. And so it's an incredible story. But the thing that's important in terms of the divine intervention is she knew, people in the office knew I had drug problems. I mean, you can't hide it at that level. She said, I just didn't see you that way. I knew something was different. And she was literally the angel that was sent to help me learn how to tell the truth, how to be a person, how to have a friend, how to be a friend. All the things that I'd never learned, even though I'd been married 3 times. So that started the road of recovery. And I did, shrinks and rehabs and all kinds of crap to get going for the next 3 years, working on myself. And in about 2010, given what I had been learning and doing, I realized that what I had learned and what I'd changed in myself could be really valuable to others. So that's when I started writing books. And I've got 20 now and I write number 21, and I've got a coaching practice with clients all over the world, et cetera, et cetera. And so now for the last 15 years, 2010 to now, I've been building that coaching practice based on that. And the only thing that divine intervention did was issue the invitation. It didn't do any of the work, but it issued the invitation loud enough. And that I finally said, okay, I don't know how to do this. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how much broken glass I got to crawl over. I got a crap load of mess. Doesn't matter. I'm going. Period. So that was the event over about 6 weeks that was the invitation to change everything.
It strikes me as really incredible because I talk to people and we've got literally almost 50, 60, 70 different interviews. And what you just described as the intervention, the divine intervention, I have had people say things, and I just explained this to you earlier, that there are individuals that we interview, and sometimes they hear that invitation come just from moving one state to another. Sometimes the intervention comes or the invitation comes in a minor thing. And then other times the invitation comes in a very drastic, more dramatic type way. And it struck me just as I was listening to you that there could have been multiple invitations and you just either chose to ignore them, maybe didn't hear them or whatever as it was leading up to that. And I'm curious to hear if that was the case with you, or if it was just, this was only the very first time
No,
that you
no,
actually.
no. Thousand of them.
Yeah.
Thousand times I felt like this is unsustainable. I don't
Mm,
know where this goes. I remember one of my four kids that was living with me, daughter, said to me one day before this, when it was still in the height of all the incredible mess, she said, she mean her and her brothers and sisters, we expect to just get a phone call one day that, you're dead.
mm,
And she was saying it both sarcastically and sadly at the same time. And I like, yeah, probably going to happen.
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that is
Yeah.
as horrible and as flip as that sounds. That was the truth. It was a reckless one-way train to hell or misery or all. And I had 1,000 times to wake up and had neither the courage nor the thing. And I think they just got louder and louder, until, you can ignore them all your life. People do, and they settle for mediocrity and misery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And finally, this was enough that I just said, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
going. I don't know what it means, but I'm going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really, really important because as we tell these stories, there's sometimes when we have a dramatic story, but then other people actually listen to that invitation at a sooner time. And then they're like, well, my story is not as powerful because I didn't have a dramatic invitation. But yet you listened to that invitation in an earlier time, like whether it was your daughter or just a move or something else, you listened to that invitation and you responded. You have more power and more. It's like to me, it just, I don't know. There's a lot of value, I think, in that. And I think sometimes we underrate those that listen to the invitation sooner rather than later.
So let me address that specifically.
Please,
Looking
please.
deeply in the eyes of those who have had a little nudge and had sense enough to pay attention the first or the second or the 10th or the 50th time, instead of when it was over the cliff and looking at crashing and burning. Good for you. You had more time to change, to add good to the world, and to be valuable. You don't have to be stupid like I was, or ignorant, or delay, and feel like whatever. I could just as easily have gotten up and gotten high the next day after that, thinking that was some crazy ass stuff, and done that. I didn't, and I can't even express to you. Like, if there was ever a candidate to be left at the bottom of the canyon, I was the poster boy.
Mm.
And even in that urgency, the divine invitation was still extended, but it was an invitation. And if you had sense enough to listen to it a year, 2 years, 5 years earlier, and exercise sovereign control over your life and do the work to get rid of old stories, good for you. And more blessed are you. I'm just counting myself grateful that here 17 and a half years later, I'm alive, I'm breathing, and I'm committed to add good to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love that. And that is exactly the message that we want to portray as far as how to break the false narratives and how to rewrite and become and live into your true narrative. One more thought on this before we move on. You mentioned about the fact that you met your wife and you were going to ride off into the sunset. And often in our society, when we think about that, the riding off into the sunset is after the prince meets the princess, or however it goes in all of those stories, they'd live happily ever after. And that's the fairy tales. But yet you mentioned something else, which I thought was absolutely key, is that she was basically your guardian angel, your angel that came in to be able to direct you through the next 3 years of incredibly hard work to change the stories. And so often, especially in our society, we think about this happily ever after, riding off into the sunset. So can you speak a little bit towards that, where it's not just I woke up the next day and everything's all just better and we rode off into the sunset and lived happily ever after?
Nothing was better. I was so scared I didn't know how to breathe. I had no idea what would possess her to walk away from a successful career and trust her own invitation and instincts. You know, when I've asked her about that, she just said, I didn't see you that way. Yeah, we all knew whatever, but I could see something else. And she, you know, she found shrinks for me to talk to, and she just said, we can do this. We're going to do it. And, you know, she was perfectly happy. She's an independent, capable woman. She's traveled all over the world on her own. She has degrees. She's done all kinds of stuff. And she just knew, like you sometimes know those things, this is the thing. But there's nothing trivial about making big changes, whether it's the kind that I needed to make or the kind that you needed to make. The stories that we have are woven into our DNA, and the work to change them is whatever it is. I happen to need a bunch of shrinks and rehab and this and that and the other. Whatever you need, you need. The key is, are you willing to stop today, go in a new direction, find the work that needs to be done and do it? My family had essentially disowned me. I was alone. And so without something, I don't think in any universe I would have been able to do that. And why she was, that's why I say she was the angel that was sent. I can't even imagine what went on in that. I mean, we've talked about it 1,000 times, and she is now my business partner and connected in every aspect of my life. And she's a flippin' holy angel. And then, you know, the fun part, her name is Joy. Like, you know, you can't make this up. And what it says to me is not that there's anything special about me. It is the lengths to which our Creator, however you want to define that, will go to invite you. You matter. No matter where you've been or what's happened, whether it's small or big, you matter. And the sooner you say yes to those nudges, the more time and power you have to do what you feel you want to do in creating a difference and adding good to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned something just briefly there, but this is part of the key, is that too often many individuals believe that they are alone and therefore attempt to accomplish all of this stuff on their own. And yet, like you just mentioned, our divine creator has put people in place to help. And just at the right time, somebody's coming along and saying, hey, I'm here to walk with you. I'm here to give you the advice. I'm here to encourage you and strengthen just at the right time. And that has come across in countless stories, in countless interviews, of one word of encouragement changing the entire trajectory of somebody's life. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
When this happened, so we had been talking about it for a couple of weeks and I told her everything. I said, you know, if you're going to even talk to me, you need to know how messy this battlefield is, you know, 10 kids and this kind of disaster and this, that, and the other. And then it was October, right after the concert. And I went upstairs and some other stuff had happened, and I suddenly resigned. Right? I resigned from my position and walked away from everything. And I thought, I don't know if we've been talking about stuff, but holy crap. So I went downstairs, went in her office, shut the door, and I said, you know, and you got to remember, I was a big shot. I was making boatloads of cash and everybody knew it and all that stuff. I said, look, you and I have been talking about stuff, but you need to know I just quit. And I don't know if I'm going to stay in the city. I don't know if I'm going to stay in the province. I don't even know if I'm going to stay in the country. So you may want to rethink all this because you may not have any idea what you're getting into.
Here's your out.
It's exactly what it was. You may want to rethink all this. She didn't drop a beat. She looked right at me and said, I'm in.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
And I said, because she'd never even been married before. And I'd been married 3 times to disaster and ruin. And I said, you know, and I was a motorcycle guy. And so I said to her, look, I'm not doing this again. So if we're doing this, this is ride or die, baby. This is ride or die.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm in. So
Absolutely.
yeah, there are people.
Yeah. So what do you do now? We've been speaking about some of the changes and the challenges, but what do you do now? What are your practices to truly step into that narrative that you want for your life. And maybe it's I mean, you share whatever you want, whatever's on your heart, but maybe it's habits. And I know one of the big things is that your desire, your passion is to help other people and to leave impact on. And I know you have a specific goal. I'll let you share that goal, but to leave those impacts. So what do you do to accomplish that? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it set on goals? What do you do to craft that life that you've always wanted?
So as I started, first did a lot of work for, like I said, 3 years just to get healthy and get organized. What happened is what happens to all of us. You suddenly or gradually realize that the changes and the fact that you've changed some things could be valuable to others beside yourself. And we as divine beings, we are built to yearn and serve. We just feel the desire to do that. Sometimes we do something with it, and sometimes we don't. How it manifested for me is I began writing and is thinking, I need to help people with this. How do I do that? I don't know. Maybe that's coaching. What is that? Because I'd never really done anything. And so I just sort of thought about that and took some coaching online stuff and started writing about stuff like that, and gradually sort of built that. I was horrible at selling or getting clients or any of that. I had to learn all those things because even though I'd been a big shot executive, it hadn't been any of that. So I had all kinds of stuff to learn and to do. And so I began at the bottom with nothing and began to write and to explore what that meant to help or to serve others with this amazing bunch of stuff that happened not only then, but the 3 years of work, realizing that there's got to be more people. And now it's now been 17 and a half years. And as I look back on that, there's two things that have been the most important. And that is, after doing the work to get healthy and making a commitment, lifelong commitment to grow, in order to do that, there's two things. One is to create, and this is really important for me because I had adopted the narrative of my life from somebody else. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to be like this. This represents success. And I had adopted that, even though it had caused me all this internal turmoil and disaster. The thing number one was to craft my own statement of being. And I call it a PTAC, personal truth and commitment. And it was spawned from this question. Every time you read a book or you go to a seminar and they tell you to write something like this or declare who you are, or whatever, you write some nice words, and you don't believe them because it feels like you're standing on quicksand. There's all this, yeah, but if anybody really knew, yeah, but all this, yeah, but. And so this question that I ask myself is, what does it take to get to bedrock? Like underneath all that, what does it take to get to bedrock? And exploring that, I've found a way, and that's what I use with people also, is to craft a document that represents, and it doesn't need anybody's approval or anything else, that is your own contract with the universe, with God, that is founded like from the core of your soul all the way to the center of the universe. And when I help people do this, and they say, oh, I already have all that, I just ask them a simple question. When you take your document and you look in your eyes in the mirror and recite it, because of course you have it memorized, right? Does it make you weep? And if they look at me like, what? And I say, throw it away, because you haven't said anything yet. Because what you decide who you are is that foundational, because that's where bedrock is, underneath all that self-doubt and all that other stuff. So creating that kind of a thing, and it's not a trivial pursuit, it's work. And the second thing is, great, after you've created that, so what? Because our memories are about this long. I don't know why we were created to die every night and wake up again every morning, but we were. And so if you don't have, then the second thing was to create a daily creation process. And I call it that instead of a morning ritual, because morning rituals sound so trivial. Mm-hmm. But it is a method by which you create yourself every morning without fail, without exception, that puts you at your highest self. And people look at me like, what? And then I ask a simple question. Well, do you think an Olympic athlete warms up before or after the event? And everybody laughs. Well, it's a stupid question. Well, of course, before. Well, then how is it that you go meet your day with your activities and your work and your play and everything else at half-mast?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why wouldn't you do that? So those two things, creating an invincible document that just tears your heart out every morning because that's what you've written it to do. And it's, again, not for approval or anything else. And the second thing is a daily creation process that capitalizes, reminds, reinforces, and connects you to those truths.
Mm-hmm.
And with those two things, you're invincible.
Yeah. I love the way that you stated that. That just makes so much sense.
And this is the book. I finally wrote this.
Living
is my
with
20th
Purpose.
book.
Gotcha.
Living with Purpose and Power. I wrote that book to put now 17 years worth of that work in there so people can figure out how to do that for themselves.
Is that which website is that on? How do we find that? And then let's say,
It's
because
on
there's
Amazon.
a lot of people listen to the podcast, so they didn't see you hold the book up. So let's just be very specific for those that are listening.
You know what's fun? When you have a name like Kellan Fluckiger, you can't hide. So if you spell my name right, you can find me on all socials. All of my books are on Amazon, and they're all there. My socials are easy to find. I love talking to people. I love meeting people. I love helping people craft their own, like, fierce ownership of their life that gets beyond the stories and excuses, no matter what they were, how little or how big, about how they're not this, that, and the other, because that's just not true. So the book is Living with Purpose and Power, and it is on Amazon. And the easiest way to find that and all the rest is my name, Kellan Fluckiger. And yes, you have to spell it right. But if you do, I can't hide.
Yeah, so I'm going to spell it out, and then just so everybody knows, it's going to be in the show notes. And I actually did a little bit of research. Your name is very Celtish. It's a very
Somebody told me that people used to ask me about Kellan, and I used to think I thought my parents thought they made it up, and then somebody told me once some years ago they thought it was Celtic. Fluckiger is Swiss. Mm-hmm. It's from Switzerland, and Kellan is apparently has Celtic roots, although I don't think my parents knew that.
Yeah,
when they gave it to me.
Yeah, but it was interesting because I actually did some research on it because it's such an interesting name. So it's Kellan. That's the first name. So Kellan, and then the last name is Fluckiger. And he's got several different websites. Again, if you do a Google search, you're going to find that, and it's impossible to miss. It literally is impossible to miss. We will put that stuff in the show notes. But I do want to give you this chance, and I do this for everybody. What would be the one thing, and it can either be something that you've already stated, something that you've already said, or something that is on your heart and you're passionate about. What would be that one thing that you would want a listener to walk away with?
My goal this year, my year starts October 14th. And the reason it starts October 14th is that's Joy's birthday. So my year starts October 14th, and my commitment this year is to reach 300 million people with a message, a method, and an opportunity for mastery. The one thing I want you to know is that you, no matter where you've been or what you think of yourself right this minute, are important. You actually matter. And no matter where you've been or what has come before, it is never too late to make the difference you yearn to make. It is never too late to offer the gift that you are to the world, to get paid, to make money doing that, and to serve at the scale you want. And my goal of 300 million is not pie in the sky. I've reached millions and millions already in previous years. And so the message to take away is you individually matter. You can do whatever you want to do, and you can create right from where you are. And it may take days, months, weeks, or years to do that. And there's nothing that's in the way if you're willing to commit and get the help you need. So the one message is, no matter what you think, no matter what's come before, you matter now. And you can have the impact you want if you're willing to walk the road.
Yeah, I love that. I think we're just going to go ahead and kind of mic drop right on that part of it because that is just, it's so, so important, so critical for everybody to know. So I am going to end. Actually, is what's the best way to get in touch with you? I mean, I know we kind of gave your name, do the search. Do you have a preferred, like, hey, connect me with me on this channel? Do you have a preferred way to do that?
I don't care. If you want to, I have a website, Kellan Fluckiger Media.com. If you're watching the thing, it's up here on the screen.
Yep.
There is a contact form there. You can find all my books there. I have a podcast I just recorded episode 958 yesterday called Your Ultimate Life. And it's about exactly what we're talking about, how to create a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy. So there's a contact form there. You can reach out to me through social. I have people that look at all that stuff for me, and I meet 10 awesome. People at least new every week. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not hard to find.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I love that. And I love that. So, and I love this conversation because of how real it is and how we actually take a look at the fact that it's not just a clean one morning you wake up and everything's easy street. There's work that has to be done. There's things that you have to do in order to create and establish and write that true narrative. And yes, you have to take care of all of the false narrative and all of the things that people have been impressing on you. So, and that's what this podcast has been about, is the fact that yes, you have the opportunity, you have the ability to be able to craft and create that new narrative. And everybody has the same amount of time. You just have to make the decision to, in this case, we're going to talk and say, you have to make the decision to receive that invitation that's there. It's going to be there. You just have to be able to be willing and open to receive that and then begin that new journey and start writing and crafting your new narrative. So until next time, I want to thank you, Kellan. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for listening, guys. If you're listening on podcast and want to actually get all of the extra details and all of the fun facial expressions and all of the other nonverbal things, you got to go on to YouTube. You'll find it there. You can find us on LinkedIn and a whole bunch of other spots, but connect with us. And I always end with this. If something was said, something impacted you, something just resonated with you, we want to hear from you. Because we want to hear the impact that's going on. And nothing gives us more pleasure and joy is when somebody responds back and tells us, hey, I changed my life because of what you said. Even if you reach out to Kellan, I don't care. I don't care if you reach out to him. I don't care if you reach out to me. I don't care who you reach out to, but reach out to somebody and tell them and share exactly what the changes are being done. So keep crafting, keep writing your story, and we'll see you next time.